feeling well, how many people are sick that are playing a critical role in it. Like yesterday when we were practicing, people wouldn't even sing their part in the song because they were feeling so bad. So, but God knew all that was going to happen. He knew He knew that this day was coming, and just pray that that He can touch them so we can go through the cantata. And pray that, obviously we figure there'll be a big crowd of family people coming to watch and everything. So just pray that the people here will be touched with what we do. So again, if you have your Bible, turn to Luke chapter number 23. We'll start there. And the thought this morning is we're going to be looking at Pilate and Jesus. We're going to be looking last week, I believe we looked at sitting down. They watched him there. But this week, I think I wanted to look at Pilate and Jesus. And I know, it's been a while back, but months back we looked at Pilate and Jesus. But I've just been thinking along these lines and on these thoughts. And so what we're going to see is that Pilate was very good at asking questions. He was very good at asking questions. You see, he was actually very good at interrogating people. But you're going to see there are times, and you're going to see that there were times where there was an obvious question, and he refused to ask that question. And so I got to thinking about that, and I got to looking at it. And so we'll look in Luke 23, verse number 3. Verse number 3, we'll read verse 1 and 1 through 3. It says, "And the whole multitude of them arose and led him unto Pilate, and they began to accuse him, saying, We found this fellow perverting the nation, and forbidding to give tribute to Caesar, saying that he himself is Christ the King." Now, we know that everything that the Jews accuse him of is really a lie. I mean, yes, he is Christ the King, but he's the King of Kings, he's the Lord of Lords. We understand that. But he says that they said that he's perverting the nation, that he's refusing to give tribute to Caesar. And I think we talked about that last week as well. We know that those things aren't true. And we also know that the Jews, they just continued to accuse Jesus. If you remember, whenever they sent him to Herod, it said they were vehemently accusing him. They were vehemently making these accusations against Jesus. And I don't even know what all those things are. The Bible doesn't even tell us what they are. But Brother Wayne, if you know anything about law enforcement, which is why I said Brother Wayne, because I figured he might know. But if you know anything about law enforcement, sometimes like if you're really bad, they call it stacking. And they just start, or you've probably heard it as they throw the book at them. And because they'll just start like, we're going to charge them with this, and we're going to charge them with this, and we're going to charge them with this, and we're going to charge them with this. And they just come up with everything they can think of, everything they can think of, instead of just being like, we had them for disorderly conduct or whatever. No, they start adding all these charges and stack all these charges against him because they're, and that's how the Jews, that's how they treated Christ. They hated him so much. They hated him so much that they said, you know what we're going to do? We're just going to keep making accusations. We're just going to keep making accusations against him until finally Pilate does what we want to, which is crucify Christ. And so in chapter 23, verse number 3, and Pilate asked him, saying, Art thou the King of the Jews? And so I wanted us to look at this one first, is because we're going to see in a little bit whenever they say he made himself the Son of God, that he doesn't ask, are you the Son of God? And so they say, hey, this man says he's Christ the King, and another place he says he's the King of the Jews. But and so Pilate asked him. He said, "Are you the King of the Jews?" And we know that Jesus, when Jesus answers, he said, "Thou sayest it." Another time he says, "Are you saying this of yourself? Are you saying this of yourself?" And so here's Pilate. And we'll look, like I said, we'll look at multiple passages right here. So leave a mark in here. Leave a mark somewhere, which I don't have a marker. We'll make one up right here. And turn over to John chapter number 18. and look at John chapter number 18. So in John chapter number 18, verse number 29, let me read 28 first. Then led they Jesus from Caiaphas unto the hall of judgment, and it was early, and they themselves went not into the judgment hall, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover. And I mean, I'll be honest with you, like, if you ever want to read a verse that defines hypocrisy, if you ever want to just read a verse that clearly defines what being a hypocrite is, that verse right there clearly defines what being a hypocrite is. Because they lied over and over and over about Jesus. They made up tales. They knew they were lying. And they knew that they were not being truthful. And one of the ways you know it, which I'll just say it now, you may hear it later today, but one of the ways you know it is whenever Judas brought the money back and gave the money back to them and said, I have betrayed innocent blood, they didn't say that's not true. They said, what is that to us? They said, what is that to us? They knew Jesus was innocent. They knew he was innocent. They knew he was not guilty of the things that they were accusing him of. They just wanted him crucified. But yet here they are, and even though that they know that they basically paid Judas the price of blood, which is what they called it, they gave him that money to betray Jesus, and they falsely accused Jesus and brought him to Pilate and are continuing to falsely accuse him. But yet they're like, hey, Mr. Pilate, will you come out here because we can't go in there because we'll defile ourselves. You want to talk about the height of hypocrisy. You want to talk about something that's ridiculous. But then you get to verse number 29. Pilate then went out unto them and said, what accusation bring ye against this man? So like I said, Pilate was very good at asking questions. He makes just a few statements, just very few statements he makes, but he asks questions continually, as it appears that he's trying to get to the bottom of this. But in my mind, he got to the bottom of it, but he still had Christ crucified. We know that he got to the bottom of it because he said, I find no fault in this man. And he didn't just say it one time. He said it over and over and over. I find no fault in this man. I find nothing worthy of death. I find no fault in him. Well, I sent him to Herod and I found no fault. He came to the right conclusion, Brother Parks. And for those of y'all that have been in here a while, you kind of understand that I almost feel bad for Pilate. I almost feel bad for him because really, if ever a man was in a no-win situation, in this case, he was in a no-win situation. But I may change that here at the end about a no-win situation. But you understand what I'm saying? Like, Jesus was going to be crucified. Before he was ever born, he was going to be crucified. When he was a baby born in Bethlehem, he was going to be crucified. And the Bible says in one place, he set his face to go to Jerusalem. He was going to Jerusalem, but he just wasn't going to Jerusalem. He was going to Calvary. And so Pilate was in, again, a no-win situation. At one point, he tried to get out of it by finding out that, maybe I can send him over to Herod. Maybe I can get Herod to condemn him. But they just mocked him and sent him back. But yet, so here's Pilate, and the Jews were not going to take anything but crucify him for an answer. And so I somewhat feel sorry for Pilate. But he says, what accusation? What is the accusation? And they said unto him, if you remember, they answered unto him, if it were not a malefactor. What? If he were not a malefactor, we wouldn't have brought him to you. Just trust us, Pilate. Just trust us. Well, if we wouldn't have brought him to you if he didn't need judged. But they also, if you look in the next verse, verse 31, then said Pilate unto them, take ye him and judge him according to your law. The Jews therefore said unto him, it is not lawful for us to put any man to death. So now Pilate realizes right here, things have changed. It's not just judgment here. It's not just that that they want this man punished. It's not just that they want this man put in prison, but they want him slain. They want him slain. And so now Pilate realizes all things are different, so now he's going to interrogate Jesus. And remember, the first question he asks is, art thou the king of the Jews? And the next thing, in verse number 34, Jesus answered, and sayest thou this of thyself, or did others tell it to thee? Again, that was the question. Art thou the king of the Jews? Verse number 35, Pilate answered, am I a Jew? Now, if you remember, when he, and again, this is early in the morning. We have to remember when this happened. This is very early in the morning. And Christ, the Jews bring Jesus before them, and they bring them to Pilate, and they bring Jesus to early in the morning. I don't know how y'all are, but I don't like getting woke up like out of my sleep. Now, I understand I got an alarm clock, and when my alarm clock goes off, I'm planning on getting up at a certain time. But if there's something, sometimes the kids are being a little rowdy, and they'll acknowledge this. Sometimes they're being a little bit too rowdy, the boys. They're being a little bit too rowdy. Sometimes, like, someone will call, and like back whenever I used to take a bunch of calls from work, that I'm trying to figure out what in the world's going on. I'm answering this call at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. My wife's like, you probably should wake up and then call them back because I'm kind of out of my head. But here's Pilate, and he's a little annoyed when he first starts. And so his first question is, am I a Jew? Am I a Jew? Like, this is a religious problem with these Jews that Caesar has put me in charge of. I'm stuck down here with these Jews, and I wish I was somewhere else, but I'm stuck with these Jews, and they're always causing issues. They're always raising a ruckus and always raising a fuss, and I've got to keep everything kind of tamped down and keep them settled down, because they can make my life miserable if they push it up the chain, which is what they threaten to do later. They said, you're not Caesar's friend. If you don't do this, you're not Caesar's friend. And so he says, am I a Jew? He said, this is a religious problem. This is what are you talking? I don't know about the king of the Jews. I don't understand this. And so again, it comes down in verse number 36. Jesus answered, my kingdom is not of this world. In verse 37, Pilate therefore said unto them, art thou a king then? So again, like I said, this stuff, it's building up. It's building up to the climax. And whenever Pilate gets to the climax, he's going to fail. If you look in verse number 38, here's Jesus and Pilate talk. Let me read 37. Pilate therefore said unto them, art thou a king then? Jesus answered, thou sayest that I'm a king. To this end was I born, and for this cause came I into the world, that I should bear witness unto the truth. Everyone that is of the truth heareth my voice. Verse 38, Pilate saith unto him, what is truth? Jesus would have gladly answered that question. If you remember, he answered it for. He said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. Jesus could have answered that question. He said, what is truth? And when he had said this, he went out again unto the Jews. So like I said, sometimes as I read over this, and you have to read all four Gospels, and Luke and John and Matthew give you the most. Mark doesn't give you a whole lot. But as I read it, sometimes I feel sympathy towards Pilate, and then other times I look and I say, you had Jesus Christ right in front of you. You had Jesus right in front of you. And I understand that most likely at this point in time, Jesus had the sin of the world on his shoulders. At this moment in time, he had the sin of the world on his shoulders. Now, the Bible doesn't tell us exactly when it happened. Whether it happened in the garden, I don't know exactly when it happened. But here's what I do understand, that he took the sin of the world on his shoulders, and when he was nailed to the cross, he had the sin of the world on him. And so here, Pilate had that. But if you remember, as Jesus is walking up, after he's been scourged, after he has been scourged, and he's walking up that hill to be crucified, as he's walking up, the women see him, and the women are there, and they're weeping, and he takes a moment and says, don't y'all weep for me. Weep for yourselves. And if you remember, hanging on the cross, he takes time out, even though both of those thieves had the Bible says they cast the same in his teeth. that while they were saying, hey, if you are who you say you are, come down. And they said, come down and save us. But then that other one said, no, wait a second. He's done nothing amiss. We should be up here. But he's done nothing amiss. And then later, there's John, and there's his mother Mary standing there, and he beholds them, and he said, and he tells John to take care of his mother. So even though Jesus is carrying the sin weight of the world on him, had Pilate really wanted to know Jesus, I think he could have. I believe that Jesus, because if you remember, he tells them that basically the ones that deliver you unto me have the greater sin. I believe, Brother Justin, that Jesus could have told Pilate, I understand and I forgive you, but we're going through with this anyway. No matter what, Jesus was going to the cross. There was no stopping it. If the devil could have stopped it, he would have wanted to stop it because he was defeated at Calvary. And so here's Jesus, and he's going to the cross. And if Pilate really wanted to know what is truth, I believe Jesus would have told him. If you remember, I don't have it written down here, but if you remember when he went before Herod, Herod was excited to see Jesus. He was excited to see him. He was looking forward to seeing him because he said, I want to see a miracle. I want to see a miracle. And Herod almost wanted like a dog and pony show of once Jesus gets here, do something, do a miracle for us, Jesus. And Jesus wouldn't answer a word. And Brother Wayne, I believe that, I believe because Herod had killed John the Baptist, I believe had Jesus answered a word, he would have said the same thing that John said, it's not lawful for you to have your brother Philip's wife. And until you deal with that sin, you're never going to know me. And until you deal with that sin, and then the sin of having John killed, you're never going to know me. So you're not going to get the privilege. But that wasn't Pilate. But here's Pilate, and he says, what is truth? What is truth? But immediately after he says it, he walks off and never gave Jesus a chance to respond. Now, we understand that sometimes, let me flip back to Matthew chapter number 23. Oh, actually, that's not 23. Matthew 27. Matthew chapter number 27. And verse number 13, I believe. In verse number 13, it says, Then said Pilate unto him, Hearest thou not how many things they witness against thee? In verse 14, it says, And he answered him to never a word. Insomuch that the governor marveled greatly. So here's Pilate. And again, like I said, Pilate is used to, Brother Randy's not going to have any note things up here because I'm going to have them all. But Pilate is used to people pleading their innocence even when they were guilty. He's used to people begging for mercy even though they didn't deserve mercy. He's used to people, just asking for any kind of leniency. And here are these Jews, and if you remember that that Pilate understood. He understood that they had delivered Jesus to him for envy. He was not guilty of anything they were accusing him of. And so here he gives Jesus an opportunity to talk. He said, do you hear all those things they're witnessing against you? And Jesus answered him never a word. He was not going to defend himself, Brother Wayne. He was not going to defend himself. He was not going to try. He was not trying to get out of going to Calvary. He was going to Calvary. He was going to be crucified. And so he answered never a word. And Pilate was amazed. He said, I don't understand. I don't understand why an innocent man would be willing to go to the cross. I don't understand why a man that I have said multiple times I find no fault in him at all would not even raise a ruckus and say, how dare you send me, an innocent man, to the cross? You've already said I was not guilty. And so he said, hearest thou not how many things they witness against thee? In the same chapter, I just want to read this verse right here. In the same chapter, in verse number 22, in verse number 22, it says, Pilate saith unto them, what shall I do then with Jesus, which is called Christ? He asked that question. He asked that question to the Jews. But he didn't ask that question to himself. He did not ask that question to himself, Brother Justin. That's a question that every man and woman in here, everyone sitting up in the balcony, for both people that are watching online, everyone needs to answer that question for themselves. It's one thing for me to ask someone else, what are you going to do with Jesus? But until I've answered the question for myself, what am I going to do with Jesus? He said, what should I do then? What should I do? But he never asked it of himself, Brother Wayne. Here he is again. He's got Jesus Christ sitting before him. He's going to put the accusation, the King of the Jews. There's a lot of other things that could have been written. And there was not a sin. That accusation again is supposed to be what he was guilty of. We talked about that last week. There was not a sin. Pilate had no sin. He crucified an innocent man. He's going to live with that on his conscience the rest of his life, that I crucified an innocent man. If you remember, he takes the time one time, same passage in Matthew chapter number 27. And I'm getting ahead of myself, but that's okay. In Matthew chapter 27, and verse number 20. Let me just look at 23 first before I get to 24. In verse number 23, he had just said, what shall I do with Jesus, which is called Christ? They all said unto him, let him be crucified. And again, I think Pilate was astonished at many things on that day. I think he saw something out of some religious people that pretended to be religious, that had the outside of the cup clean, but inwardly they were ravening wolves. They looked nice on the outside, but Pilate saw something that day that probably shook him, so that if anyone ever tried to proselyte Pilate to become a Jew, he would have said no. He would have said, if that's what being a Jew is, I don't want to be it. But if what that man was that I had crucified, if that's what being a Jew is, then you can talk to me about that. But don't ever talk to me about being something like those chief priests. Don't ever talk to me about being what those scribes are. Don't talk to me about what those Pharisees are, because I saw something in them that I didn't even see in myself. They all said unto him, let him be crucified. And the governor said, why? What evil hath he done? Pilate, he couldn't figure it out. He was astonished that they were they were asking for the death of this man. And I don't know what story. We know that Herod knew the stories because he said, I want to see a miracle. But apparently Pilate didn't know. He didn't know the stories like Herod did, but I'm sure he knew some of them. And all he'd ever heard up to this point was good about Jesus. All Jesus had ever done before this point was good. Yes, the Jews couldn't stand him for healing on the Sabbath day. What did Pilate care about what happened on the Sabbath day? They couldn't stand him for things like that, but Pilate didn't care about none of that stuff. And again, like I said, that why? What evil hath he done? He's like, please explain to me what is going on here. Please explain to me what is going on here. But they cried out the more, saying, let him be crucified. Verse 24, it says, when Pilate saw that he could prevail nothing, but that rather a tumult was made, he took water and washed his hands before the multitude, saying, I am innocent of the blood of this just person. See ye to it. I understand what he was trying to do. I understand symbolically what he was trying to do was to say, it's not on me, it's on you. And the Jews took it as that, because they said in the next verse, his blood will be on us and on our children. His blood will be on us and on our children. What a terrible statement. But Pilate, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way that Mr. Pilate can just wash his hands and say, I'm innocent. Again, Jesus gave him a little bit of leeway and basically said those guys are going to receive the greater judgment, but you're not innocent. And I think a lot of times in this day and age, people, they try to cleanse their hands. They try to cleanse their conscience. They go to church on Christmas. They show up on Resurrection Sunday. And Grandma and Granddad are so happy to see them. Papa and Mama, whatever you call them, they're so happy to see them. And that's the only time they give to God. And they try and cleanse their conscience just a little bit. And they look around and look and be like, well, I'll tell you what. It wasn't me that crucified Jesus, it was them. But we understand that Jesus went to the cross for our sins. My sins, your sins. He didn't just go for bad sins. A lot of times we compare ourselves to someone and be like, well, I'm not as bad as him. I haven't done what she's done. I haven't done what he has done. I've never done this. I've never done that. If you've never been born again, you're just as lost as the person, the most wicked, evil person you can think of. And you're going to go to the same hell. And so Pilate tried to cleanse his conscience. He tried to cleanse it by saying, watch, I'm washing my hands of this situation. And you don't wash your hands. You either accept Christ, you either receive Christ, you either are born again by the grace of God, or you're lost. And just as Cain and Abel, if you remember Cain and Abel from back in Genesis, that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground, but Abel brought a sacrifice, and God accepted Abel's sacrifice, but not Cain's. And you say, I'm trying to be a good person. You're just trying to cleanse your conscience. I'm trying to turn over a new leaf. I'm trying to do better. I'm trying to do these things. If you have never been born again by the precious shed blood of Jesus Christ, you are cleansing your conscience in vain. Pilate cleansed his conscience in vain. The Bible doesn't tell us what happened. It doesn't tell us. We know history. It didn't work out good for Pilate. Pilate, doesn't have a good name in history. But I'm going to tell you that if you remember, his wife comes to him. And men, I'm sorry, but sometimes it's just true. His wife comes to him and says, have nothing to do with this just man, because I've suffered many things in a dream this night because of him. And here, and so he testified of his own that he was a just man. He testified on his own that he was an innocent man. And yet he was so weak that he bowed down to the Jews and said, you take him. And sometimes you see someone that's weak, they'll find a way to justify. They'll find a way to justify. And they're like, well, I really didn't want to do it, but, and then after the but is whoever they're blaming for why they did what they really didn't want to do. But my wife, but my husband, but my kids, I had to do it because of this, I had to do it because of that. No, you did it because you wanted to do it. And you are just blaming them because you feel guilty about it. And so here's Pilate, and he's got Jesus, and he has the opportunity. If you turn back to John chapter number 19, in John chapter number 19, verse number 7, the Jews answered him, "We have a law, and by our law he ought to die, because he made himself the Son of God." Now, before he was just a king, but this should have changed a lot of things. When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he was the more afraid. I'll be honest with you. I see Pilate and a lot of people that almost get saved. Brother Justin, they're so close. They're so close. Their conscience is bothering them. And they're trying to find a way to cleanse their conscience. God has put them under conviction. And they know that they're a sinner. And they know that they have sinned. And they're under this conviction. And God is right there offering them a way out. And he says he was the more afraid. And all he had to do was say, "Are you really the Son of God?" That's not what he asked. And went again into the judgment hall and saith unto Jesus, "Whence art thou?" He said, "Where are you from?" What? They said, he's claiming to be a king. He's claiming to be the king of the Jews. He says, "Are you the king of the Jews?" But when they said, he's claiming to be the Son of God, he made himself the Son of God. He didn't make himself. He was the Son of God. He always was the Son of God. He didn't become the Son of God when he was born. John chapter 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And we know that Word in John 1 was Jesus. If you remember, we talked about from Genesis, all the way in Genesis 1, where it says, where God said, "Let us make man in our image." That us and our was God the Father and God the Son and God the Holy Ghost talking about what they were going to do for creation. And so here is Pilate's chance to say, "Are you really the Son of God? I've heard some things about you. Tell me about this fellow Lazarus." How could the story of Lazarus not make it to Pilate's ear? It's just been a few days, 7, 8 days? It's only been a week or so before. It bothered the Jews so much, they're like, we're probably going to have to do something about Lazarus too. We're probably going to have to do something. It's causing such a ruckus, and so many people are going to believe on Jesus, we're probably going to have to do something about Lazarus. Pilate never said, like, how in the world do you raise a man from the dead after he's been there 4 days? He never said, tell me about these lepers. I heard about these 10 lepers, and you cleansed them. He never asked him a single question about that. He just said, whence art thou? Where are you from? Where are you from? And every time I hear that, I think about that song, you know, on my mother's side, on my father's side. I think about that song. But anyway, that he said, where are you from? Whence art thou? That wasn't the question that needed to be asked. Pilate was really good. We've been through a bunch of them. He was really good at asking questions. But when it came to the money question, every good lawyer, if you've ever been in court, if you've ever seen a trial, every good lawyer knows the money question. He knows, and he builds it up and builds it up and builds it up, and then he got you. And here's Pilate, and he knows the question that should be asked, but he didn't want to know the answer. Can you imagine, Brother Parks? Can you imagine living with the fact that I crucified an innocent man? That's a lot, Brother Justin. But they probably, it's just another Jew. It's just another Jew. But living with the fact that I crucified Jesus Christ, the Son of God, that's a whole other thing you're going to have to live with. And so he said, you know what? I just won't ask the question. If I don't ask the question, then I don't know. And then I can just plead ignorance. Get pulled over. Get pulled over this afternoon. Bub's not here, he's sick. But get pulled over. Get pulled over on the way to church from the Oaks. And be like, do you know how fast you're going? I don't know. They know how fast you're going. Do you know what the speed limit is? I don't know. Doesn't matter. Ignorance that's not an excuse. It's not an excuse. Chris is back there shaking his head because he's got a boy now that's got a speeding ticket under his belt. No. We should have. But anyway, you understand, like you get pulled over and you're like, I don't know. Ignorance is not an excuse. I didn't know the law. Well, it doesn't matter if you didn't know the law. You broke the law. You violated the law. Guess what, Pilate? Your ignorance is saying, well, I didn't know he was the Son of God. I knew there was something special about him, and I knew he was innocent, and I knew all these things, but I just didn't know. One day, if Pilate never got saved, one day he's going to stand before God, and God's going to say, you should have asked the question that day. Not, where are you from? Not where are you from. It says, but Jesus gave him no answer. I believe, and this is me believing, had he really wanted to know, Jesus would have told him. I've already told y'all. He took the time after he's been scourged, after he's been beaten, after he's been mocked, after he's had a crown of thorns on his head and blood flowed down across his face, after he was to the point where his visage was so marred you couldn't recognize him. He took the point and said, ladies, don't weep for me, weep for yourselves. And the thief on the cross and his mother, again, he took the time for those people. He would have took the time for Pilate if he really wanted to know. But I don't think he wanted to know. And so, again, I just have a few things here that Pilate should have asked, didn't ask. The first one, again, Matthew chapter number 27, verse number 19. And I said it earlier, but I'll just repeat it here. When he sat down on the judgment seat, his wife sent unto him, saying, Have thou nothing to do with that just man? For I have suffered many things this day in a dream because of him. I think he should have asked Jesus, should I listen to my wife? Probably every man in here, if we were smart, which I'm not, Miss Jimmy, so I mean, I'm the pot calling the kettle here. But again, you understand, Brother Wayne, there's some times, and my wife, she's going to have this and record it, and it's going to be used against me in my house, at a very soon date. At a very soon date, this is going to be used against me. But Brother Wayne, there are some times. Now again, I'm the man of the house. The buck falls on me. The final decision is my decision. But there are some times when I probably should have just listened to what my wife had to say. And I wonder if Pilate, if he's in hell right now, Brother Parks, I wonder if he's like, I should have listened to my wife. I should have listened to her. Why didn't I listen to her? I imagine if Pilate's in hell right now, he's still asking questions, Brother Wayne. Why didn't I listen? Why didn't I ask him? Why didn't I ask him, Pilate, I don't understand. You're an innocent man. Or Jesus, I don't understand. Why are you doing this? I wrote it down this way. I know you're an innocent man. And you know you're an innocent man. So why don't you defend yourself? Can you imagine to get a personalized gospel message from Jesus Christ that said, the reason I'm doing it is for you, Pilate. I'm going to die so that you don't have to. I am going to pay for all the sins, and Pilate, I know you, and I know they're many. They may not be as many as Herod, but I know you, and they're many. And I am going to die for you, Pilate. Can you imagine if he just would have asked the question, Brother Justin? He asked all kinds of other questions. But he never asked Jesus, why are you doing this? Please tell me. Please explain to me what is going on here. I am not a Jew. I am not a Jew. And you're innocent. And I don't understand what could have happened, why these people are so intent on having you crucified. But he never asked the question, Brother Parks. He never said, would you just please tell me? He got close. He said, what is truth? But he never made it. Another question, and the last question, Pilate should have asked Jesus, is there any hope for me? Just washing my hands, it's not enough. It's not enough. And he had Jesus right there. And all he had to say is, how can I have hope? How can I have hope? Can you imagine the gospel message again that Jesus could have preached to Pilate on how to have hope? I believe they could have worked out a thing, and Pilate could have been forgiven of his sins right there, and Jesus said, I'm still going up that hill. I still need to be scourged. I still have to be scourged. I still have to be bruised. I still have to have all this done to me, and I want it to happen. But Mr. Pilate, you can walk out of here an innocent man if you'll just ask me. Thank you.